tonight I want to use a product that I don't think I've done a video on ever before. These are the water painters, and they come in packs of 3, and there are 3 sizes. And I'm just gonna take the caps off here. There's a real thin tip, there's a medium tip, and then there's a broad tip, which I'm gonna show you a technique with it tonight. But you put water in these. I don't have water in this one. And you just unscrew this bottom part, and they unscrew the opposite direction of what you think. I'm going to move this out of the way for just a second. You would think you would turn it, what would that be? Counterclockwise, I guess. But you turn it to the right to get this barrel off, and then you just put water in here. And then the barrel says push. That's because when you squeeze them, oops, see, I'm turning it the wrong way. They're opposite of how you think they would turn. So when you squeeze these, you send water down into the brush. And I've been using this one today. I always forget to turn my lights on. There we go. You can see the water coming down through here into the brush, and you can just kind of hold your hand, and I don't know if you can see it on camera, but I can see the water coming down through here and then into my hand. So these are fun to play with. It would be an alternative to the blending pen that I showed recently with I used it with the watercolor pencils. You could use one of these filled with water to blend your color pencils with. But tonight I'm going to use these with just my ink pads. And the set of 3, you can find these on page 146 in the catalog. They're right here. And then the description is over here on page 147. They're just $12, and you get the 3 in the set. So, and I'm going to show you tonight a couple of different ways to use them. And I'll show you my cards first. By the way, this is the, oh, I knew I'd forget the name. Fine Art Floral. It's the Fine Art Floral Designer Series paper. And this is also the Fine Art Floral paper. So the part I did with the water painters are these stripes. Okay, and I'm going to show you how I did that. But as you can see, you can make a background for a large sentiment and have it coordinate with your paper. So you can make your own, I guess you could call it designer series paper, right? And coordinate it. And then this was another card I made where I just kind of swiped on some ink, and then I swiped on a different color down here and stamped over top of it. This was terracotta, and this was bumblebee down here, the yellow. I'll show you how I did that. Last but not least, this little fella. This is the Someone Special stamp set. I adore this stamp set. I used it a lot when it first came out, and I haven't used it recently. It is in the annual catalog. But anyway, what I did was I used the fine tip to make an outline and then a little swoop for where the sentiment would go. And it just allowed me to make a really cute card with just plain old cardstock. I did have this piece embossed, and I'm going to show you how I did this outline tonight. And I have some paper towel here. It's handy to have paper towel to kind of absorb extra water as you're working with these. And I just have some pieces cut so I can demonstrate. And I'm going to start with the widest water painter. And that's what I made these stripes with. I'm going to try Just Jade and see how it looks. Some colors I think would be too dark. Oh, you know what? I'm going to use Gorgeous Grape. I think some colors would be too dark and you wouldn't be able to stamp over top of them. So I want to see what Gorgeous Grape does. So I'm just using a regular classic stamp pad, and I want to press on the back of it just with my thumbs. What I'm doing is I'm getting ink to transfer from the pad to the case. So I find when I press my thumbs on the back, I have better results. So there I got a little, not too much though. Let's see how that worked. There's a little more. This is what becomes your painting palette. And I know I already have some water squeezed down in here. So I'm just going to get this wet. So it's pretty fluid. And I'm just going to draw a line. Get my sample. I'm just going to draw a line with the flat edge of this brush diagonally across this card. So here we go. Just like that. That's all you do. And then I'm going to draw another line. And I want to start off the edge here. And I'm just going to bring it up just like that. And then another one. Now if your line starts to fade out on you, and it will on this size paper, just turn your paper around and come in from the other side. There we go. And this is watercolor, so it's not supposed to be perfect, and I'm running out of ink. It's not supposed to be perfect. There should be variations of light and dark. There we go. I think that I'm going to like the Gorgeous Grape. I don't want to get ink on my cards. So that's Gorgeous Grape, and you know what this would be pretty with is the Hydrangea Hill Designer Series paper, and you could stamp right over top of that with a sentiment. Now one thing you want to do is make sure that these are completely dry before you stamp on top of them. And I just used my Memento Tuxedo Black today, and it worked fine. Actually, I used several different colors today to stamp over top of this, and it works fine. You just have to make sure this is dry. If you're in a hurry, you can take your heat tool or your heat gun and dry them off, but I don't need to use this one for my sample tonight, so I'm just going to set it aside. And I want to show you, oh, well first, so this is what I made from the stripes. Now, one thing that I learned as I was making these today, sometimes on the edges you get a little puddle of ink, and it didn't really bother me too much, but if you want to clean this up, just cut your paper a little bit bigger than you're going to need it, and then you can trim off the edges before you stamp your sentiment. I didn't really mind how mine looked, so I didn't do that, but so that's what I did with the stripes. Now to make this pattern or this design, I used two different color inks, so let me see. Let me get a narrow piece of paper. Actually, I think I'm going to use Misty Moonlight and maybe Bermuda Bay. Yeah. Always forget to squeeze the cases. So I'm squeezing them to get the ink. Oh, see, that one worked well. So I have two different color inks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swipe down from the top with one of them, and then I'm going to quickly clean my brush off on the paper towel and swipe up from the bottom with the other one, and we'll see how it turns out. This is one of those techniques where every time you do it, it's a little bit different. So I'm just squeezing some water down into my brush. There, yep. So I'm gonna put the green on top, I think. That might be really strong. That's okay, because green tends to color well. And you don't want this too wet. Oh, I didn't tell you. I'm using Whisper White and or Basic White Thick cardstock. You can use the watercolor paper that Stampin' Up! Sells, but what I found today was it colored beautifully, but when I went to stamp the sentiment, because the watercolor paper has a texture to it, it didn't take the stamp as well as I would have liked. But it does take this water beautifully, and it doesn't warp or bubble. But the thick cardstock seems to work pretty well without bubbling too much. So I'm just going to swoop down from the top like that. Clean my brush out, and while it's still wet, I'm going to come in from the bottom with the Misty Moonlight and kind of let it blend there in the middle. So when that's dry, I can stamp over top of it. I could even come down with a little bit more green underneath here. When you come in while everything's still wet, it blends for you. Okay, so we'll set that one aside and let it dry. Now, I'm going to keep this one out and use it for the next technique that I did. So for this one, I used the thin, actually I think it's the middle, I don't know now, let me look at these. Yes, I used the middle size brush. And it's not a flat brush, it's more of a pointy brush. And that's what I used to make this outline and this little swoop where I put the sentiment. So let me show you how I did that. So it's the same thing. I just picked up a little bit of ink and came around the edges just like this. And your lines are supposed to look a little squiggly because this is all done by hand. Just like that. There we go. And then if I wanted to recreate this card, I'm afraid I'm going to get ink on something. So I'll just put a little swoop down here where I want to put the sentiment. So I'll pick up some ink and just do that. That's all there is to it. And again, I'll let that dry really well before I stamp over top of it with the sentiment. And we'll let this dry and I'll stamp on this in a bit so we can see how these stamp later. But I want to show you how to put together one of these cards. And I already have my striped paper dry. So this is Wishing You the Happiest Birthdays. And this is from, oh, where did I put my stamp set? I believe the stamp set is actually called The Happiest of Birthdays. I don't know where I put it. Oh, here it is, yes. Happiest of Birthdays, and this is it in the annual catalog? I believe so. A nice, big, bold sentiment that works great with this technique. So I'm going to ink up. Let me show you what I'm making. I'm going to ink up with, I think, Blackberry Bliss. I believe that's what this paper is. And this is another one of those fine art floral papers. And it doesn't list Blackberry Bliss as a color, but I'll tell you what, that's pretty close right there. And so I chose a Blackberry Bliss matte, and these stripes were made with terracotta ink, terracotta tile ink, and it works really well. So that is a color in this paper. And then I have a bumblebee base. This is just a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. Am I right? Yes, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base, and I just cut off 1 inch from the front of the card. And that allows me to put the little strip of paper, which we'll do that in a minute. But first, let's stamp our sentiment on our striped paper. And I'm using the Stamparatus for this because when I have a big stamp with a lot of real estate on it, like this one, I put a support under here. I like to have the opportunity to restamp just in case I missed getting even coverage. And I'm actually going to go with Rich Razzleberry because it's a little lighter. Blackberry Bliss can sometimes read as just black. And I know that my stamp pad is pretty rich. So I'm going to use Rich Razzleberry and just ink up this big stamp. Okay, so I have my big sentiment inked up, and I'm just gonna press down and give this a rub. And I'm putting my sleeve over my hand so my hand slides better. There we go. Oh, pretty good. I have a few little spots that I think I could get better. So I'm gonna re-ink and just stamp one more time. And as you can see, the beauty of the Stamparatus is that you can do this more than once in case you're a little thin with the ink. And I like that. I'm happy with that. So I'll take this out and set this aside. Now this is what I was talking about earlier when I said sometimes the edges will catch a little extra water. The water will pool there. And if you make your paper a little bigger than your final dimension, you can always trim that off. But I decided I was okay with this. I wasn't going to trim it. And this is a 3x4 basic white thick cardstock. I'm using the thick because it takes the watercolor a little bit better. And then this is a 3 1/4 by 4 1/4 piece of Blackberry Bliss that I'm going to layer it onto. There we go. So this is a 3x4 basic white thick cardstock going on to a 3 1/4 by 4 1/4 piece of Blackberry Bliss. And I striped it with terracotta tile and stamped it with Rich Razzleberry. And I took all of my color information from this fine art floral paper. Love this. So this I'm just going to adhere right on the edge of the card, exactly on the edge, and then this is going to go on top like that, and it's going to hang over just a little bit. You could just make it a straight front card if you wanted, and maybe just put a stripe of this paper down the front, but I like to have something a little different. So when I put the glue on this piece, I want to make sure I don't get out over the edge here. And I'm pretty much just centering it top to bottom. And then for the inside of this card, I tucked in a piece of, I think I cut this about 1/8 of an inch smaller than the white here. So that would be 2 7/8 by 3 7/8. And I just have 2 of them here. I just tucked it inside and let it overlap a little bit the designer series paper. Just want to make sure that I'm not going to be showing. Looks good. There we go. So there's a place for an inside sentiment or a note. Okay, so that's the striped technique. And you can see the variations that I did today. And I want to bring this back in and see, and I want to show you how I just stamped over top of that little swoop of color. And I'm going to use this little set, the Someone Special set. These are just adorable stamps. And I'm just going to use black ink. And I want to get my pad out here because these are the photopolymers. So I want to stamp on the pad. So I'm going to stamp him just up here in the center. Black ink. I don't have the whole card prepared to put this on, but I would just want to show you how I stamped it. Okay, so he's going to be holding a flower. So we want to, but I can center him. Can you see that? Pretty much, and still have room for the flower. I'm going to stamp a flower in his hands. His paws, I guess, is what they are. And so I'm just going to stamp this right over top of where I stamped him, because you can see through these. They're photopolymer. And try to keep it in my little frame that I made. There we go. Isn't that adorable? Sorry, I'm going on and on about. I haven't seen him in a while. I haven't used this stamp set in a while, and I forgot how much I really like it. Okay, so then, oops, then I want to stamp the sentiment. I'm going to stamp the sentiment over top of this swoop so it kind of pops a little bit. So I have happy birthday, and it's just going to go right over. I could tilt it, but I'm just going to make it straight, or pretty straight. And right over top of that swoop that I made with my painter. Just like that. And that kind of draws the eye down to the sentiment. Isn't that sweet? One more thing, I'm going to stamp over top of these combined colors. I'm pulling out all the oldies but goodies here tonight. So the Daisy Lane set has several different sizes of daisies. It has this really cool fern. I actually might stamp this on here. I think that would be pretty. And I love these two sentiments because they're a nice size for something like this on the front of a card. So I'm going to go with this fern. And it's kind of an odd stamp for this set because I don't know that daisies, they don't have this kind of leaf. I don't know, but anyway, I do like this stamp. And I think I will use black again. I'm going to turn it this way so I have more room down here to stamp my sentiment. And I don't need the pad because this is the red rubber stamp and it has the cushioning built in. Now this paper does curl up just a tiny bit when you do the watercolor on it. So you could put it on the Stamparatus to hold it flat, but I can hold, this is small enough I can hold it with my hands. There we go. Oh, that's pretty. Okay, so I like that, and I think I will put friend on this one for the sentiment. There we go. Okay, so that can be matted on a coordinating color and used on a card front. If you'd like to see 2 more cards made with the sample pieces that I created in this video, click on the link you'll find in the description. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel here so that you can easily find new videos. Thanks so much for watching today. I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.